Hey, we're Summer and Candace. I'm Candace.
I'm Summer.
And this is the Connected Life Book Club podcast. We're doing the book Love Lives Here. And this is week 3. So we're doing chapters 7 through 9.
It's flying by.
I know. Well, and it's so interesting because you kind of get to know Maria the more you read about her family and her story, and things are kind of developing. So based on chapter 7, which was the story of the jeweler where they went and got their ring made for when they were getting married, and how he was held at gunpoint, and like all this stuff happened, but he still persevered. That leads us to the first question, which is, what's a difficult circumstance that you pushed through?
So when I was thinking about this, I mean, I think we've all had those things in our life which were hard, things that, we were faced with. But one thing that really sticks out to me, I think one of the hardest things I had to get past was someone I respected not believing in me in a big way.
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah, it was super hard. When I was just getting started in radio, I was a student at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. I was doing their afternoon show, so I was like traffic, weather, stuff like that. And I really felt like God was calling me into radio, and I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to be mentored. And so I went to this guy. He was a really big deal there, and really respected in the industry. And I was super enthusiastic, and I asked if he would mentor me. And I sent him an email, and then I never heard back. But he was teaching one of my classes one day. He was like the fill-in. And so after the class, I go up to him like, hey, did you get my email? And I'm just wondering what you thought on that. Would you be willing to mentor me?
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and he's like, yeah, I am not going to do that. And I was so taken aback.
Yikes.
And he literally told me, he's like, there is nothing special about you. And
what?
I have never had something that blatant. And I mean, like I said, this is a guy who's kind of a big deal. And so, I basically am like, cool. And I leave so he didn't see me crying. And I sat in my car and I bawled. And I thought maybe I misunderstood God. And I mean, like, my windows fogged up. I was crying so hard. I'm like calling Adrian. I'm like, my life is a lie, and
Whoa.
But I kept going anyways. I really felt like this was something that the Lord had for me. And I've never forgotten that guy, though. But he no longer affects me. Like, that lack of encouragement is a really light way of putting the way that guy communicated to me. It startled me. And I think that in other times, other seasons of my life, I would have stopped right there and been like, I have no idea what I'm doing, because if this guy can't see it, well, then I'm fooling myself.
Whoa.
Yeah,
we're just diving right in, aren't we? Holy moly. I mean, that's just, I couldn't see myself pushing through that, I mean, I actually just heard something. It was an interview with somebody that actually studies what makes students successful in college. And it came down to the biggest thing, including test scores, IQ levels, opportunities they had in all of their schooling growing up. The biggest thing was grit, which is kind of that X factor, that thing that just kind of keeps people going and persevering. And I think for us, Jesus is that X factor for us, because he's the one that puts callings on our life, and he's the one that guides us to where we should go in life. And so I'm sure that that's kind of what kept you going, but whoa.
Yeah. It was like my biggest nightmare. I'm a bit of a people pleaser. Like I'm constantly working on that. And to have this guy that I respected so much tell me there was nothing special about me. I mean, literally my nightmare.
Oh my word.
Yeah. What about you?
So I'd say probably one of the most difficult times in my life that I can pinpoint is somewhat self-induced, because I was going to college. I was full-time plus. I was taking just the most amount of credits I've ever taken. I had classes from 8 a.m. to 3, and then I was also working as a waitress. And so then right at 3, I would go straight to my waitressing job, and then I was captaining my rugby team, my college rugby team, and coaching. So that was like a huge handful. And so then after I'd waitress, I'd go straight to rugby practice, which started at 10 p.m. And I'd do that until midnight, and then wake up the next morning at 7 a.m. and do the whole thing all over again, while still putting in a 10 to 20 hours at the radio station.
Woof.
And I do that kind of like in between classes or in between times that I wasn't working as a waitress. And it was just, it was a lot, you know? And I'm sure that there are people that can relate to having a schedule that full. So I'm not at all saying that, you know, it was anything special, because it wrecked me. I mean, especially my schooling was the biggest thing that suffered, because I wasn't able to give the right amount of attention to homework. You know, but I couldn't let go of my radio time, because that was what I wanted to do with my life. And so that seemed even more important than school at the time. And, you know, I literally had 3 changes of clothes in the car that I needed every single day. And after a couple months of doing that, I just broke down. I mean, it was just wearing on me. And, you know, I was sad. I was anxious constantly. I mean, I would say that that's the closest that I've ever gotten to being depressed, if not actually being depressed. So I started seeing a counselor, and it was just the best thing that had ever happened to me. Because as I was talking to her, the one thing that really stuck out to me, and that still sticks out to me, is she goes, "What is the worst thing that could happen?" And I'm like, well, I don't know. I got to, you know, go back to school. I got to pay more for classes that I've already taken. I got to, you know, I'm going to be farther behind in my radio dream. I'm not going to make enough money to pay for the school that I'm going to. I'm going to lose out on the one thing that I really love, which is playing rugby. And she's like, okay, you got it all out. Now, are any of those life or death? And it was like, well, no, it's not life or death. You know, I'm slinging pasta and throwing rugby balls around. Like, no, it's not life or death. There are people that count on me for sure, but I'm not going to injure myself, you know, by not doing any of the things. And yeah, just going to counseling during that time. And I got really lucky, because I was going to a public school, a state school, and my counselor was through the university. But when I told her what station I worked at, she's like, well, I'm, you know, not that I typically bring this up with people, but I am a Christian, and I do actually listen to your radio station. Oh. And that was just a blessing. Yeah. That was such a blessing, because, you know, I mean, there are all sorts of different perspectives and things that can come from different worldviews. And so that was a time that I really had to push on, and I was better for it.
Yeah.
You know, ended up graduating school.
And sometimes it takes asking for help, and there's such a strength in that. And so for you, it was this counselor. And I think that for a lot of people, when they're in that place where things are difficult, there's still, I think even today, this stigma around counseling. And I think that is so false. And I'm so glad that you got that help. And it actually kind of leads to our next question. It says the amount of advice available on any one topic is overwhelming. So who's on your board of advisors? Who do you go to when you need help, when you need answers, when you need input?
So I feel like, Summer, especially you being a mom, that mom world can be the pinnacle for all sorts of advice, and people giving you unnecessary advice. Yes. Not unnecessary necessarily, but unasked for advice.
Sure.
Unsolicited. That's what I was looking for. So unsolicited advice. Does your story relate to that, or do you have a different like board of advisors?
Well, I think it depends on what I'm going through. So if my question is a parenting question, I'll often go to my mom. So my mom is definitely on my board of advisors. Within my small group, I have some other moms that are kind of in my age range, but a little bit further ahead, which I think for me is important. Like you've been there already. Whereas other parts of my life, I have people who are journeying with me as peers. And so I think my board of advisors is pretty varied. My family, my sister, my mom, my aunt, those are 3 people that I have like on a group thread. If I have an announcement, if I have something I want to share, if I have a question, boom, like I go right there. And my small group girls, that's another place. And then I have a couple good friends, my friend Katie, my friend Julie. They're people I'm able to go to a lot. And with the question of how did I choose them? I think for me, when I'm looking for people that I can turn to for advice and for sound wisdom, I'm looking for somebody who emulates in some way who I want to be. Like this
Right.
person has a trait that I want to have more of in my life. But they also need to be honest and imperfect. Because like if I have someone in my life who is just this golden child, never makes a mistake, I'm going to feel like I can't relate to them. But if I can lean on you, and in some ways you can lean on me, and this feels like a relationship, an exchange, then I'm going to feel safer in that place. So that's kind of how I choose, I guess.
That
to
totally
answer
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
And as I think about my board of advisors, for me, I think the biggest thing that helps me choose is history, or like somebody that knows me well. Because I think we all go through tendencies and patterns in our life. And so if somebody can speak into a situation that maybe I've been in before and remind me, hey, remember last time that happened? This is probably the better way to go. That can be really helpful. So, of course, my mom, because she's known me the longest. But
I like a little wink to the camera. Oh, hey, Mom.
But then I have two really close friends that I've had. I mean, we've been friends since second or third grade. I mean, for a very, very long time. And they're people that are loyal, So that's Chelsea and Jenna. And my friend Tabitha is definitely on my board of advisors because she sees the world in a different way. So she every time something comes up, I'll be like, well, I know this is what I should do. And she goes, absolutely not. And she always has some like little different perspective where she looks at the world in just a more unique way than some of the people around me. And so it gives me the other side of things, which I really value that. I feel like I have too many board of advisor members to name, but a lot of that does come from the situation, you know.
So you don't necessarily go to all of them for everything?
No, not all of them for everything, but yeah, they are people that I will keep updated.
Yeah.
So even if it's a big thing that I'd personally been struggling with, I'll let them know the process.
Sure.
It's even funny, like I cut my hair.
Just looks
yesterday.
super cute.
Thanks. And my husband, I was asking him about it, and he's like, no, keep your hair long. But he's only ever known me with long hair.
Sure.
This is a silly example, but I was talking to my board of advisors about it, and they're like, oh, yeah. And then they start sending me pictures of myself the last time I had short hair. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. So maybe change it a little bit this way, or, and I mean, it's not exactly short right now, but still, the shorter look. And so there are people that have known me for long enough to know, like, this worked really well, but remember that? Let's stay away from that.
Yeah. This haircut, not this haircut.
Exactly.
All right. So the final chapter we're tackling today is chapter 9. And the question we have for that is, when was the last time you left your comfort zone for a time?
That's a great question, because as much as I am a comfort person, I don't necessarily have a comfort zone. I can just be comfortable in most situations, which is weird.
Lucky duck.
I mean, part of it is just like I've always run pretty middle ground, So like I don't necessarily let things get to me a whole lot. And so that means that if there's high stress or fear or things like that, those are just strong emotions that I tend to just stay in the middle.
Okay.
And so
you
yeah.
carry your comfort zone with you. It's
carry
like you
it
live in a
with me.
comfort bubble. Wherever you go, you're comfortable. I like that. I want that bubble.
Well, I try, but there are definitely things that, pop that bubble for me. Like if I'm ever the center of attention for no reason, I do not care for that.
Okay.
And it sounds weird. It sounds weird because I am somebody that obviously, I'm on air every day, and
sure.
there are people that are listening, but I feel like, okay, well, that's my job. There's a reason for that. But this is a silly example. Again, just full of silly examples.
You're so silly.
When I was in high school, I was the homecoming queen.
Stop it.
I know. And honestly, it was a huge surprise to me because I was not the person that was like the popular group, and I knew that everybody wanted to be my friend, and I that just was not me, but I think people felt really comfortable with me. And so yeah, whatever. So I became the homecoming queen. And so at the ceremony, you know, you're standing in front of, I had thousands of kids at my high school. You're standing in front of thousands of kids, and then you win, and literally you feel everybody's attention on you. And it was, you know, it was really cool. It was definitely a highlight of my high school career. But the next day I stayed homesick from school because I just didn't like all the attention.
That's
I was
so
like,
cute.
I didn't do anything to deserve this. People just saw my name on a piece of paper and they said, oh yeah, I know her, or whatever, you know? And so I stayed homesick.
It reminds me of
avoid that.
Maria, where she was named the Rose Parade
Yes.
Queen or something like that. But it was
Yeah.
just like, to her, it was no big deal.
Right.
Like, she didn't even, I couldn't get past the fact that, like, she didn't even ever tell her kids about it.
Isn't that funny?
That's like, that just blows my mind. Like, that's
Right.
just something, yeah, I was, you know, on national television and as the queen of the parade. No big deal. NBD.
It's so funny.
See, for me, I think comfort zones, I had to redefine them a little bit in my life when I was in my early 20s. When I went to school, to Moody, originally I went to the Spokane, Washington campus. I was there for a year. And that was the first time in my life, I don't know, I was an older student. I was, 23 or something. And this was the first time that I was truly going somewhere by myself with zero connections.
Sure.
To a new city, to a new school with new people, having to figure out housing, how to figure out my school schedule. I had to make money somehow, and just literally pioneered my own way.
Right.
And so that was scary. That was leaving my comfort zone. But what I found when I got there was just this amazing world, these amazing people, and I formed deeper connections than I had in my life up to that point. When I transferred back to Chicago, where I was from, I'm like, oh, it's going to be easy. I'm going home. You know, like I figured I knew what I was getting into. I thought I was going back to my comfort zone. But when I got there, it was the worst.
Oh,
like, I thought it was going to be so great, but I think there was a part of me that like just left my heart back in Spokane. And so that first semester when I came back to Chicago, I mean, I really struggled with depression, and I made no friends, and I would lie, and I'm not proud of this, but I would lie in the lunchroom and say, oh, yeah, I've got to work on campus. I need to take my dinner to go, because I didn't know who to sit with. And I would go sit in my room by myself and eat. Like for a whole semester. And then I ended up moving off campus. Like a lot of that fell on me, but I was expecting comfort to be found in this place. And when I arrived, comfort wasn't where I thought it would be. And I realized that comfort's where you make it. You know, I made Spokane comfortable, and so it was comfortable. Chicago, it didn't just automatically happen. And so like you said, you know, you take it with you, you make it what it's going to be.
Yeah. Oh man. I think that's really spot on. Because it's like, as I think back to my childhood, I think my childhood is when I was most uncomfortable all the time, because I am somebody that kind of, I like to absorb my surroundings before I ease my way into it. Kind of a late bloomer in that way. I need a little warm up time.
Sure.
Like Maria said, like she needs a runway for her to start her day. I needed a runway for life. So I was like a pretty shy kid.
I find that fascinating.
Isn't it crazy? And like shy in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Of course, when I was comfortable, you know, I was just myself. But I remember my mom, because I was crying in the bathroom at a youth group event. And I was...
Who hasn't?
I know, right? But I was in like elementary school, so I was like just getting ready. And she was like, you know, sometimes you just have to sit down and decide that you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here.
I love that.
This is your place. And you just, you know, whether you have to shake everyone's hand and get it out of the way, or just decide that, you know, this is your place now. And that was probably the biggest thing that helped me get outside of my comfort zone. So...
That is so cool.
Or create my little comfort zone that I get to take with me now.
I like that. I think that's such good advice. Like, you need to decide that you're meant to be here.
Yeah.
And I think that even with this book club, seeing the people communicating on the Facebook page, and I know that some people have shared with us that they joined because they don't have that community, because they don't have those built-in female relationships in their life, and seeing those same people reach out and say, I'm supposed to be here, and making the most of it and creating that comfort zone. And I love that. And I'm so glad that that's happening, and I'm so glad that we're doing this, Candace.
Well, and keep going. As you join our Facebook group, as you see other people chiming in, feel free to share little kernels of what you learned. Feel free to subscribe to this podcast so you keep getting these updates and kind of stick with us. And if you haven't yet signed up, people that are listening have signed up, right?
They could be feeling it out. They could just be
That's true.
on our website. Maybe you are on Apple Podcast,
iTunes podcasts?
some podcast thing, and you're like, oh, what's this top-rated, beloved podcast? This is me projecting. I'm really hoping that happens one day.
Yeah.
And you don't know what we're about. ConnectedLifeBookClub.com to sign up, to join with us. And we will be back next week to discuss week number 4.
Yep. Chapters 10 through 12?
10 through 12.
10 through 12.
See you then.